There are a lot of sequels in the movieverse. I know, Captain Obvious over here, but it's true. The fact that Home Alone got 5 of the bastard titles in its run is a sign of it all, really, isn't it? Now, some of them are admittedly pretty ace, with the same amount of effort and love going to each one. I mean, take a look at Magic Mike XXL. Fwah! I mean, I would. Yet sometimes we don't even get the sequels that we want, and even more frustratingly, some of them have been part made but dropped at the last moment. So that's what we're here to look at today. With this in mind, I'm Jules for Whatculture.com, and these are 10 awesome versions of movie sequels that almost existed. Number 10, Return of the Jedi with Wookiees. Star Wars Episode 6 went through a lot of changes. That much we all know is very true. At one point, Luke was going to kill Vader but leave the Emperor for another day, Han might have stayed dead for another film, and the Ewoks might never have existed. Yes, those little bears that feel very out of place for some in the original were meant to be bigger, shaggier, and more aggressive creatures called, Wookiees. It was meant to be Wookiees, and the Battle of Endor would have actually taken place on Kashyyyk. Chewie would have been given a bigger story role and maybe even staved off appearing in that bomb that was the Star Wars Holiday Xmas special. Number 9, X-Men The Phoenix Saga. X-Men The Last Stand was absolute bollocks. No, it is. No, it really is. And you know why? It's because of that scene where the fat mutant makes himself thin to squeeze in between people when he's sitting down. Why the would ever anyone choose to be that fat? It's dumb. And so was this movie. It's not even canon now, which is actually quite nice, but it does mean that Bryan Singer's original plan for the third film could technically take place. His story also focused on the Dark Phoenix saga, but it would take up the full narrative rather than just being a subplot. Jean Grey would ultimately destroy herself to save the world and would reshape the X-Men franchise as we know it. Alas, we got less of that and more of Vinnie Jones running through walls and then not running through walls. Great. Number 8, The Hobbit, There and Back Again in one movie. The extended editions of the Hobbit films clock in around 9 hours. It arguably never needed to be that long, really, did it? And originally that was going to be addressed in that there was only going to be one sequel which wrapped up everything in a much neater and more succinct fashion. This was Peter Jackson and Del Toro's plan, but because of studio pressures that demanded it to be split into 3 films and pad the subplots out in original tales, we ended up getting a trilogy of prequels that unfortunately, definitely 100% pale in comparison to The Lord of the Rings. Number 7, Alien 5 made by Ridley Scott and James Cameron. This is just a shame this never happened. I mean, imagine it, a 5th Alien film written by the 2 men who actually understand its universe and characters. And for a while, it almost seemed like the dream would come true. Both men came back to the series after the, let's say, tepid reaction to Resurrection, and they wanted to do right by the franchise. However, it was made clear that Fox wanted to push Alien vs. Predator as the next entry, and the pressure was on to manufacture this showdown rather than repair any damage done to Alien. There were details on what this fantasy booking would include, such as bringing back Ripley, showing aliens' first contact with humans, and also how they came to be as a species. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because a lot of it was used for Prometheus, yet while that film still wasn't too great, we could have hoped for a lot more with Cameron and Ridley at the helm. Number 6, Spider-Man 4 instead of The Amazing Spider-Man. It's pretty much widely accepted that Amazing Spider-Man only came about because Sony didn't want to lose the rights of Spider-Man back to Marvel. But at one point, it wasn't the only Spider-Man film being made. It turns out that while Sam Raimi's third installment was pretty much detested by the fans, he'd actually began to work on Spider-Man 4 straight after 3 released. It would have starred John Malkovich as the Vulture, Anne Hathaway as Black Cat, and Dylan Baker again as the Lizard. However, the project was dropped when the time constraints of the film rights reared their heads, and they realised that the film was nowhere near completion. Number 5, Jurassic Park 3 with a plot that makes sense. Remember at the end of Jurassic Park 3 when those pterodons were flying towards the mainland and it was all like, that's so nice, that's so f***ing nice, no ways, they're dangerous, Imagine what damage those f***ers would do to a skyline once they hit it. Well, that was one of the many mistakes that the third film made, alongside daydreaming of talking raptors, but originally it wasn't so silly. In fact, the central story in the draft script detailed it being centered around a murder investigation. It begins with a pterodon having escaped the island and eating a few people. See, I told you so. They're dangerous, which prompts Grant and company to venture back to confront what's going on. Now, doesn't that make so much more sense than tricking him into saving your little son who went on a dino parasail? The little prick. Number 4, Predator 2 starring Arnie. Danny Glover fighting predators. Oh, what a joy. He is too old for this shit. Switching the real jungle for a concrete one and having DG face off against gangs and an intergalactic hunter was a strange but campy joy. Yet originally it was going to be Dutch once again in the role. The original script had Arnie returning to his combat-loving ways as an aging soldier leading a new group of upstarts against a predator, which just sounds so tasty. However, this never came to be because of salary negotiations with the big man, yet it does raise the question, well, he's back in movies now, so why not kickstart this idea again? I know I'd be keen to see a properly matured Duke duff up this space drifter.
You're one ugly motherfucker.
Number 3. Tim Burton's third Batman. Burton's Batman was a massive success. Dark, weird, and full of interesting visual designs. It sparked a love for the brooding knight in the mainstream, which has been carried on for over a decade. The second one was a little bit weird and silly in places, but it was still a fantastically enjoyable film. And that's when the ride stopped. And we all wondered why. Well, according to Warner Bros., it was because the second film was too dark and they wanted a more family-friendly film. So it was out with Burton and in with Joel. My God, stop killing Batman! You're killing Batman! Shoemaker. There's not many details on what might have been in Burton's third film, which he had said was always planned, but many speculate it would have seen Harvey Dent turn to Two-Face, which could have been done very well. No matter your thoughts on Burton's love for the camp and melodramatic, anything would have been a damn sight better than the Joker impression that Harvey Dent was doing in this film and Jim Carrey's limb-full wailings. But actually, a quick side note, I actually really do enjoy Batman Forever. It's so utterly that I actually find myself drawn to it. Number 2. Alien 3 on Earth. The original teaser trailer for Alien 3 uttered the lines, "On Earth, everyone can hear you scream," but in a much less posh voice than I've got. However, that's not what we got. In fact, it was pretty safe to say that very few people knew what they were getting with this film, as it contained more original drafts than a house made of Swiss cheese. At one point, it was going to be based around Corporal Hicks adventuring on our planet and exploring his relationship with the Weyland-Yutani Corporation in much more detail, which would have been amazing for fans, as it would have stood as a fill-in-gaps film. Yet, this was dropped alongside so many other ideas, which ended up in a messy film which contained some promise, but there was just so many better ideas to choose from than what we got. And number 1, The Dark Knight's End. Although The Dark Knight Rises ended with Batman dead and Bruce Wayne in hiding, it still left enough open for more movies to be set in the realistic Gotham that had been built up, destroyed, and built up again over the Dark Knight trilogy. The most obvious continuation would have been the antics of John Blake, aka Joseph Gordon-Levitt's Robin, who in the very final scene began to take up the Batman mantle, or the Batmantle. This idea was floated a couple of times before it was announced DC were going to start from scratch with Man of Steel, but it had real potential. As The Dark Knight Rises dealt with various parts of the Nightfall arc, it would only make sense for a follow-up to deal with the events of Night Quest and Night's End. Taking place after Bane beats Bruce Wayne, it sees assassin Jean-Paul Valley take up the Batman mantle, or the Batmantle as I said before. However, he is clearly unstable for the legacy, becoming a mentally unstable maniac who brutally attacks criminals. Bruce Wayne ultimately returns from his retirement and trains up to take down his successor. It fits the ending of The Dark Knight Rises, and while it would loosen some of the trilogy's tightness, it's easy to see how this would have worked on screen. And those were the sequels that we unfortunately never got. Let me know about any others you've heard about in the comments below, and why not swing by Whatculture.com for more news and articles like this every goddamn day. As always, I've been Jules, you've been awesome, and I'll speak to you soon.